If you blink, you'll miss the moment where my life split clean in two. 1 second, I was standing alone in my lab on Christmas Eve, listening to the quiet hum of incubators. The next, I was watching my own bloodline turn a federal research facility into a wedding venue. And that was the moment I stopped being the responsible sister. My name is Eleanor Price. I'm 33 years old, and I'm a biochemical engineer specializing in polymer-degrading microbes. I've spent my entire adult life building things that last. Systems, safeguards, boundaries. Independence isn't just a personality trait for me, it's survival. This story didn't begin with betrayal. It began with luck that looked like destiny. 3 years ago, I secured a $1.2 million federal sustainability grant to research enzymes capable of breaking down industrial plastics. The kind of project politicians love to name drop but never actually understand. The funding came with rules. Lots of them. Security protocols. Zoning battles. Surprise inspections. I formed an LLC. I fought the county for 9 brutal months. I won by being relentless. My secret weapon was a property my family never cared about, an old winter estate outside town that my grandmother left me because, in her words, "You're the only one who won't turn it into something cheap." Everyone else wanted to sell it. I turned it into something invisible. From the outside, it looked like a restored historic conservatory. White trim, arched glass, snow always collecting perfectly along the roofline in December. Inside, it was a controlled access laboratory, fully compliant, temperature regulated, and monitored. Beauty hiding discipline. Just like me. By Christmas Eve, the lab was finally stable. Years of sacrifice had condensed into that quiet night. No parties, no family dinners. Just me, data, and a future that felt earned. Then my phone vibrated. A single text from my younger sister, Marissa. "Surprise! You're gonna love this." I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because 5 minutes later, headlights started flooding my driveway. Cars. So many cars. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe the neighbors. Maybe an accident. Then I heard laughter. Music. A generator kicking on. I stepped outside into the cold, lab coat still on, and watched as strangers I had never met walked confidently toward my building. Carrying gifts. Wearing heels. Dragging garment bags through the snow. That's when I saw the archway. White roses. Gold ribbon. A wedding arch. Set directly in front of my lab doors. My sister stepped out of a black SUV like she was in a movie. Fur-lined coat. Hair done. Smiling like she owned the night. She hugged me like this was normal. "Eleanor," she said, breathless with excitement. "Isn't this perfect? A Christmas Eve wedding. It's so you." I didn't speak, because my brain was busy doing math. Federal property. Restricted access. Biohazard protocols. Unauthorized entry. Felonies. Hold on, before we get into the real stuff, I want to know, what are you doing at this exact moment while hearing my voice? I love seeing your answers down below in the comments. Marissa leaned in and whispered, "Relax. It's just family." That's when I realized something chilling. This wasn't a misunderstanding. They hadn't asked because they never planned to. They didn't see my work as real. They saw a pretty building, and they decided it was theirs. Behind her, my mother waved at me. My uncle carried folding chairs into my lab. Someone uncorked champagne, and somewhere inside, an alarm began to flash red. Because if even one sealed room was breached, my career wouldn't just be over. The government would come knocking, and my family had no idea what they'd just started. There's a specific kind of fear that doesn't scream. It sharpens. I stood there in the snow, Christmas lights flickering behind me, while my family streamed past like this was a rented barn instead of a federally monitored research site. Every step they took felt like a countdown I couldn't see. I pulled Marissa aside. Hard. Tell me you didn't send invitations with this address, I said, low and tight. She laughed. Actually laughed. Relax, Ellie. It's just for tonight. We needed somewhere elegant, and you're always bragging about this place. Plus, it's Christmas Eve. No one's working. That sentence told me everything. She thought rules slept on holidays. I tried again. Slowly. Carefully. This building is restricted. There are live cultures inside. If anyone opens the wrong door. She cut me off with a smile that had always worked on our parents. You always do this. Make things dramatic so you can feel important. Behind her, my mother was already rearranging tables. My aunt asked if the lighting could be softer. My cousin leaned against a door clearly labeled authorized personnel only. I felt invisible. This wasn't new. Growing up, Marissa was the celebration. I was the background noise. Her birthdays were events. Mine were scheduling conflicts. When I got into grad school, my parents asked if it was necessary to move so far. When Marissa announced her engagement, they cried. So when she decided my lab would be her venue, no one questioned it. Not once. I rushed inside. The lab was warm, humming, alive. Red and green LEDs blinked like warped Christmas decorations. And people were everywhere. A guest had already opened the secondary prep room because it looked interesting. Someone else was taking selfies near my containment freezer. I saw a child pressing their hands against a glass partition. That's when my stomach dropped. One of the access seals was broken. Not fully breached, but compromised. I shoved my way through the crowd, shouting for everyone to stop. Music drowned me out. I ran diagnostics on my tablet. The system flagged unauthorized entry. Time-stamped. Logged. Which meant somewhere a server had noticed. And servers don't forget. I called my project liaison. Straight to voicemail. Of course. Outside, the officiant tapped the mic. We're about to begin. Marissa caught my eye across the room and mouthed, Please don't ruin this. That was the moment something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not theatrically, but cleanly. Like a switch flipping. I realized I had two choices. Destroy myself trying to protect people who had never protected me, or let the truth do what it was designed to do. I stopped yelling. I stopped running. I walked calmly to the control terminal and did the one thing I had avoided all night. I let the system do its job. Every access violation, every open door, every unauthorized body inside the facility. Logged, uploaded, time-stamped, automatically forwarded to oversight. The alert went out at 6:47 p.m. Christmas Eve. No sirens yet. Just inevitability. The ceremony started. Marissa walked down the aisle smiling, completely unaware she was walking through evidence. My mother squeezed my hand. Thank you for letting this happen, she whispered. It means so much to your sister. I smiled back. 10 minutes later, headlights appeared again, this time slow, deliberate, official. Black SUVs. No decorations. No music. Someone asked if they were late guests. Then the lab doors locked automatically. The music cut. And a voice came over the intercom. This is a federal compliance inspection. Please remain where you are. Silence fell so hard it felt physical. Marissa turned to me. Her face drained of color. What did you do? She whispered. I looked at her, calm for the first time all night. I stopped covering for you. Outside, agents stepped into the snow. Inside, My family finally understood something was wrong, but they still didn't understand the scale. They didn't know about the charges, the fines, the investigation, and they definitely didn't know what I had prepared next, because this wasn't revenge fueled by anger. It was built on patience, and it was just getting started. The first thing people misunderstand about consequences is the timing. They expect explosions, screaming, instant collapse. What actually happens is quieter, slower, more surgical. The agents didn't rush in yelling. They walked, calm, polite, deadly in their precision. Two of them stepped forward, badges visible, eyes already scanning the room like they were cataloging a crime scene instead of a wedding. One spoke into a radio. Another checked a tablet that mirrored the same alerts I'd been watching for months. "This facility is now under temporary lockdown," the lead agent announced. "For everyone's safety, no one is permitted to leave." Someone laughed nervously. Someone else asked if this was a prank. My mother's hand tightened around mine. "Eleanor," she whispered, "tell them there's been a mistake." Marissa stood frozen at the altar. Her white dress looked suddenly fragile, like it could stain just from being looked at too hard. I met my mother's eyes. "There's no mistake." That's when the questions started. Who authorized the event? Who distributed access? Who disabled the entry seal? Every answer pointed in one direction. Marissa tried to explain. She always did. She told them it was family property, that it was just one night, that it was Christmas Eve. The agent nodded, expression unchanged. "Ma'am, federal regulations don't observe holidays." That line landed like a slap. They began escorting guests out in small groups, documenting names, taking statements. Phones were collected. IDs were scanned. What had started as a celebration turned into a processing line. I watched my relatives shrink. The same people who dismissed my work now stared at me like I'd summoned a storm. An hour later, the lab was empty except for family. And the agents. Marissa sat on a folding chair, veil in her lap, mascara streaked. My father paced. My mother cried silently. Then the lead agent asked the question that changed everything. "Ms. Price," he said, turning to me, "were you aware this event was planned?" I took a breath. This was the moment where people like me are expected to soften, to protect family at personal cost. I didn't. "I became aware approximately 30 minutes before guests arrived," I said. I objected. I attempted to stop it. Marissa's head snapped up. "You didn't try," she hissed. "You let it happen." The agent looked between us. "Did you grant permission?" "No," I said. "I did not." Silence. That single word severed something permanently. The agent nodded and typed. "Thank you for your cooperation." Marissa stood abruptly. "You can't do this to me," she said, pointing at me. "You're my sister." I looked at her, really looked, and saw someone who had spent her whole life assuming I would absorb the damage so she could shine. I said quietly. That night ended with citations, not arrests. Not yet, but the damage was done. Over the next week, the consequences unfolded like dominoes. My parents received notices about potential liability. The wedding vendors demanded payment after equipment was confiscated. Marissa's new husband, who had known about the plan and said nothing, was questioned separately. And then there was the city. The zoning board reopened my case. Neighbors were interviewed. Every permit was re-examined. But here's the twist no one expected. I was clean, painfully clean. Every protocol followed. Every objection documented. Every violation traceable away from me. While my family scrambled, I stayed silent. Until Marissa came to my door. It was 3 days after Christmas. Snow still heavy on the ground. She looked smaller without the dress, without the audience. She begged. She said I'd ruined her life. She said I could still fix it if I told them it was a misunderstanding. I listened. Then I handed her a folder. Inside were screenshots, texts, emails, the invitation she sent using my lab's address, the message where she said, "Ellie will freak out but she'll get over it." Her face collapsed. "I'm not fixing this," I said. "I'm finishing it." She left without another word. What she didn't know was that the investigation had uncovered something else, something far bigger than a wedding, and it was tied directly to her. Because sometimes, revenge doesn't come from what you do. It comes from what you finally allow to be seen. The call came at 6:12 a.m., that quiet gray hour after Christmas when the world feels hungover from pretending everything is fine. I already knew it wasn't good news. No one calls that early to apologize. "Ms. Price," the voice said, professional and tight, "we've identified additional irregularities connected to the unauthorized event at your facility." I sat up slowly, heart steady. "Go on." What they found had nothing to do with my research, and everything to do with how the wedding was paid for. As it turns out, Marissa hadn't just borrowed my lab. She'd used my name. Multiple deposits, large ones, had been made to vendors under an LLC almost identical to mine. One letter off. One number changed. Close enough to confuse. Close enough to pass. She'd done it because she assumed I'd never notice. Because she assumed, like always, that my work was too abstract to matter. The problem: federal audits don't assume. They verify. The funds she moved triggered alerts across 3 agencies. What began as a compliance check became a financial investigation. I was asked to come in. I brought everything. Every receipt. Every email. Every legal document showing the clear line between my operation and her actions. By the end of the day, I wasn't under scrutiny. I was a cooperating witness. That night, my parents called a family meeting. They sat across from me like strangers. My mother looked exhausted. My father looked angry, but not at Marissa. "At some point," he said, "you have to ask yourself if being right is worth destroying your family." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I asked myself that for 33 years, I said. This is just the first time I answered honestly. They told me Marissa was facing fines she couldn't pay, that her husband's business accounts were frozen, that people were talking. They asked me to step in, to make a statement, to blur the truth. I refused. That's when the threats started. Not loud ones, quiet ones. My mother said I'd be alone someday. My father said I was cold. An aunt messaged me that I was no longer welcome. And then Marissa did something desperate. She went public. She posted a tearful video claiming I sabotaged her wedding out of jealousy, that I weaponized my job to humiliate her. The comments were vicious. For about 12 hours. Then the documents leaked. Not by me. By the investigation. Permits. Financial trails. Screenshots. The narrative flipped so fast it was dizzying. Marissa deleted the video. Too late. Her employer placed her on leave. Her husband moved out. And I received an email I had been waiting for since the moment I let the system log that first violation. Grant extension approved. Additional funding awarded. Turns out agencies really appreciate integrity under pressure. Christmas decorations came down across the city. So did illusions. I walked through my lab alone that night, the same way I had on Christmas Eve, only now everything was quiet again. restored, sterile. I thought about my grandmother, about what she'd said. Don't make it cheap. I finally understood she wasn't talking about the building. The final blow came a week later. Marissa was formally charged, not for the wedding, but for financial misrepresentation tied to the fake LLC. She didn't call me. My parents didn't either. And for the first time in my life, the silence didn't hurt. Because revenge isn't about watching someone fall. It's about standing still while the truth does the work. But there was one more decision left to make. One that would decide whether this story ended quietly or echoed far beyond my family. Power doesn't arrive loudly. It settles. By the time January wrapped its cold fingers around the city, the scandal had a name. Reporters loved names. They called it the Christmas Eve lab incident. I never gave an interview. I didn't need to. Every article traced the same arc: entitlement, deception, consequences. And every version of the story ended with my name described the same way: uncooperative with family, fully cooperative with authorities. I wore that line like armor. The investigation deepened, not outward. No fishing expeditions. No smear attempts. Just Marissa. The more they dug, the more they found. Not just the fake LLC, but patterns. Years of small shortcuts. Borrowed names. Assumed forgiveness. The kind of behavior that survives only when someone else keeps cleaning it up. That someone had been me. Until Christmas Eve. A prosecutor asked me why I hadn't noticed sooner. I told him the truth. Because I was raised to believe that if I stayed quiet, everything would stay peaceful. He nodded like he'd heard that sentence 100 times. My family tried one last angle. They sent my uncle, always the negotiator. He brought coffee. He brought nostalgia. He told me Marissa was scared. That prison was being discussed. That I could shift the tone if I wanted. I asked him one question. Has anyone apologized? He didn't answer. I stood up. Meeting over. The trial didn't come quickly. These things never do. In the meantime, my life changed in small, startling ways. Colleagues treated me differently. Not colder, clearer. They trusted me. Invitations came in. Panels. Conferences. Advisory boards. I accepted selectively. I learned something important during that time. Boundaries don't isolate you. They filter. By the time the charges were finalized, Marissa had pleaded down. No prison, but restitution, probation, a permanent stain she couldn't charm away. My parents sent a single message. We hope you're happy. I didn't respond. On the anniversary of the incident, I hosted something new. Not a party. Not a celebration. An open house. For educators. Environmental groups. Students. The lab doors opened under supervision. Tours were guided. Everything transparent. I stood at the entrance as snow fell, just like it had on Christmas Eve. Someone asked if I was nervous letting people in again. I smiled. Not when they're invited. That night, alone again, I poured a glass of wine and sat where the wedding arch had once stood. I thought about revenge. How people imagine it as fire. Or cruelty. Mine was quieter. I didn't destroy my sister. I stopped protecting her from herself. And in doing so, I finally protected me. But stories like this don't really end when the paperwork is done. They end when you choose what to do with the space left behind. And I had a lot of space now. Space to build. Space to speak. Space to tell the truth without apologizing. The final step wasn't legal. It was personal. Because forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. And silence doesn't mean peace. And as Christmas approached again, I made a choice that would make sure this cycle never repeated. Not in my family. Not in my name. The second Christmas Eve arrived quietly. No sirens. No music bleeding through walls that weren't meant for it. Just snow. And choice. I used to think distance was cruel. Now I know it's precise. In the year after the incident, my family tried every version of re-entry. Soft apologies. Backhanded compliments. Long emails that said everything except I was wrong. I answered none of them. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. Because clarity changes how you see the past. I started therapy, not because I was broken, but because I wanted language for what had always been happening. The therapist gave it a name. Role assignment. Marissa was the sun. I was the gravity. Everything orbited her. I kept things from flying apart. Once I stepped away, the system collapsed. That wasn't my fault. Professionally, things accelerated. My research entered applied trials. Plastic samples dissolved faster than projected. The data was clean. Beautiful. On paper, the grant agencies called it remarkable resilience under pressure. Off paper, they called me something else. Reliable. That word followed me everywhere. I was invited to consult on federal guidelines, asked to help redesign compliance protocols, ironically, the same ones that had exposed my sister. I said yes, not to punish her, but to make sure no one like her could ever hide behind someone like me again. In December, my parents sent an invitation. Christmas Eve dinner. Same house. Same table. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied with one sentence. I won't attend events where my boundaries are treated as optional. No response. And that was answer enough. Instead, I spent Christmas Eve in the lab. Not working. Just existing. I decorated a single corner. Subtle lights. A small wreath on the interior door. Beauty without performance. At 11:58 p.m., my phone buzzed. Marissa. Her message was short. No excuses. No accusations. I know I can't fix what I broke. I just wanted you to know I finally understand what it cost you. I read it twice. Understanding doesn't equal accountability. But it's where accountability starts. I didn't reply. Not yet. Because forgiveness, like trust, is rebuilt, if ever, on evidence, not emotion. That night, I wrote something instead. A letter. Not to her. To myself. I wrote down everything I had tolerated in the name of family. Every moment I'd been told to be smaller. Every time silence was framed as love. Then I folded it and locked it in my desk. A record. Not a wound. In the months that followed, the story faded from headlines. As they always do. But its impact stayed. New hires knew the rules. Visitors respected the space. And my name, my real name, was attached to something solid. On the next Christmas Eve, I did something radical. I rested. No lab. No calls. Just a quiet evening in a place I chose, with people who didn't expect me to disappear for their comfort. That's the part of revenge no one talks about. The life you build after you stop negotiating your worth. But one final moment remained. One last conversation that would close this chapter completely. Because Marissa wasn't done reaching out. And this time, I was ready to answer. The last conversation didn't happen on Christmas Eve. It happened a few days after, when the decorations were already coming down and the world had moved on. That felt right. Marissa asked if we could meet somewhere public. Neutral ground. A cafe halfway between our lives. When she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. No dramatic entrance. No confident smile. Just a woman carrying the weight of consequences she could no longer redirect. We sat. Silence stretched. "I'm not here to ask you to fix anything," she said finally. "I know you won't." I nodded. That alone told me how far she'd come. She didn't cry. She didn't blame. She told me about the probation, the restitution, the friends who vanished when the charm stopped working. Then she said something I had waited my entire life to hear, without realizing it. "I thought you'd always be there to catch me." I sipped my coffee. "I was. You just never noticed the fall." We sat with that. I told her the truth. Not harshly, not gently, honestly, that what she did wasn't just illegal, it was symbolic. She had turned my work into a backdrop, my boundaries into inconveniences, my silence into consent. "And I won't live like that again," I said. She nodded. "I know." We didn't hug. We didn't promise holidays together. What we did was something rarer. We ended the conversation without pretending. When I left the cafe, I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. Back at the lab, the winter sun reflected off the glass just like it had a year earlier. But this time, nothing inside me was bracing for impact. The project launched publicly in March. The same facility that once hosted a wedding now hosted senators, scientists, and students. No one crossed a line. Because lines were visible now. At the end of the presentation, someone asked how I stayed calm under pressure. I smiled and said, "I trust my systems." That night, alone, I opened my desk and reread the letter I'd written to myself. Then I shredded it. Not because it didn't matter, but because it had done its job. Revenge isn't loud. It doesn't need witnesses. It's waking up in a life where no one gets access without earning it. It's Christmas Eve being just another peaceful night. It's knowing that if everything fell apart tomorrow, you'd still have yourself. That's what my family taught me. Not through love, but through contrast. And that lesson cost them everything they assumed I'd always give for free. If you've ever been the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who holds everything together, let this be your reminder. You're allowed to let go. Before we close, if this story hit closer to home than you expected, make sure you like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel Silent Revenge Lab for more stories where truth does the damage and silence does the healing. Because sometimes, the most powerful revenge is simply refusing to be used again.